it's really validating for me to hear that I'm helping people an entryway into just their orientation around what might be possible with finance.
Welcome to the Money Healing Club podcast. I'm Rachel Duncan. I'm a financial therapist and art therapist, and I founded the Money Healing Club. You've come to the softest place to land in personal finance, where we talk about all the things we don't usually say when we talk about money. This podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. For help with your particular situation, please seek help from a licensed mental health, tax, legal, or finance professional. Today on the podcast, I interview Jasmine Rashid. Jasmine is a New York-raised, Oakland-based, Bangladeshi American who believes deeply in people power. She's a financial activist, writer, and impact investing professional. She successfully supported the Families Belong Together coalition in shifting billions of dollars in big bank financing away from the migrant detention and private prison industry. In her role as director of impact for Candide Group, over the course of 6+ years, she helped investors flow their money to predominantly women and BIPOC-led social justice-focused companies, funds, and other vital organizations building the next economy. Her book, The Financial Activist Playbook, builds on her knowledge base as a Congressman John Lewis Fellow, a Just Economy Institute alum, a trauma of money methods certified practitioner like me, and lived experience as a girl in her late 20s, just trying her best to navigate contradictions under late capitalism and helping to build something better. We read her book in the Money Healing Club a few months ago, and it was deemed our favorite finance book for people with a conscience who also want to do money better. The link to that book is in the show notes. I highly recommend it. Hey, leave me a voicemail. Do you ever feel caught between wanting to contribute to the greater good and wondering how you can actually afford to? You're going to get a lot of insights in my talk with Jasmine Rashid. All right, Jasmine, welcome to the Money Healing Club podcast. I have been a fangirl of yours for a while. You first popped on my radar because we both did the Trauma of Money Certified Practitioner track. I think you did it a little bit before me. So you were like, that illustrious alum, and they were promoting your work. I was like, what is this? I think this person in this book is exactly what me and my clients need. And then I had the great fortune of seeing you on your book tour in person when you came through Denver a few months ago. So I'm really happy that you're here on the podcast. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Yeah, it was so good to meet you in Denver. And I still have my little tissue pack of my money healing tissues that I am making my way through. So thank you for the thoughtfulness there.
Right, for this late cold season. Yeah, I will share. This is my swag. I have little packets of tissues that say it's okay to cry about money. And that's my little handout. Okay, Jasmine, I think my last one. Wonderful. Well, okay, I want to back up a little bit. And I'm wondering, with this work you're doing, and I know you're hoofing it and you're doing the book tour, and it's probably all you think about, kind of like me. What are two things you just wish we all talked about more often? Both on the financial side, and then maybe something that doesn't seem to be related, but it is. What should we just be talking about more when it comes to financial activism?
So I think macro level, we all need to be talking a little bit more about how scarcity is man-made, right? Like the idea that there's not enough to go around is totally manufactured, because the reality is there is a very, very small percentage of the world population quietly hoarding a very large portion of wealth for no other reason besides they can. And that's how it's been. And it's only escalating. And so I think just being able to name the reality of wealth inequality, but also wealth hoarding and the extremes that we see proliferated by billionaires is, for me, a good reminder to keep our eyes on the targets, and that not everything's about the personal responsibility of oh, it's on me to fix this thing, when 99.9% of us aren't the ones who are actively part of that hoarding. Some of us may be, right? And are connected to that in different ways and maybe part of the wealth defense industry. But yeah, I think I just like to ground us in the reality that the problem is identifiable and not something that I feel like has kind of come into public consciousness enough. The second thing that maybe is not directly about financial activism, but I think is very core to the way that I move through the world and what I've realized through this process of trying to understand ways to shift cultures of money and abundance is there's so many other forms of wealth beyond financial capital, particularly when it comes to social capital and community. Like I say all the time that I am so wealthy in community and so fortunate. And I think part of that is like the realization, the deeply humbling realization that like when you invest in both your own healing, right, and authentic relationships that are kind of mutual, that are again not a sense of like giver and receiver, but just about kind of like doing the humaning together, the dividends that come from that are endless. And so yeah, just community wealth is something I've been focusing and thinking a lot about, and that I think is a severely undertapped resource.
Absolutely. And I think it's shifted a lot in our lifetime. I found myself writing something just recently, and it's kind of cheesy. I'm sure I heard it somewhere else that like, oh, your network is your net worth.
Mm.
And it's cheesy, but gosh, it's true.
Oh, it's
It's
true.
still to this day, like, I don't know what the number is. It's very high. Like, over 80% of jobs you're getting through someone you know. Even
Yeah,
all the
period.
all the LinkedIn's, all the Indeed.com postings, like it has never cracked how we connect each other. And hey, I could be having the worst day, but if someone reaches out and like needs a job and I know who to connect them to, I'm going to do it. Like
For
that's
sure.
easy, and how we can connect each other is just it's a not only an easy thing, but like people really want to help. We really want to help each other,
Mhm.
don't we? And I think like there's so many good eggs. Like most people, I don't know. I'm a little optimistic, maybe. I know that there's some people who make choices I don't always agree with, of course, but like really, it's amazing how cooperative humans are. Like it
Totally.
really
Yeah.
is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's beautiful. I believe in that too. I feel very rich in that way too. So I love that. Different kinds of wealth. Yeah, there really are.
Mhm.
I'm wondering on your book tour, I'm wondering if there's been any feedback or questions that you weren't expecting. Like, has anything kind of
Mm.
been like, oh, just wondering if there's like either specific anecdotes or a theme that's been coming up that you weren't expecting.
It's always really interesting to me, the feedback I get around, people saying, thank you for pushing me out of my comfort zone, or this was a little bit more radical than I was expecting. And very rarely do I ever feel like I say anything radical. It's funny. I sit in this like really interesting position where I think my role is to be able to just like speak truth to the reality that we live in. And I forget that, I do have this privilege for many reasons, my positionality, access to say things that are uncomfortable, but that don't feel that uncomfortable for me because I've been doing it for a while. And so I've had kind of this reoccurring thing specifically around just like naming the reality of all of us having money trauma under capitalism. Like to me, that just like again, like we've gone through the trauma of money program. Like that seems just like intuitive to me at this point, but I understand how it can feel jarring when you're hearing it for the first time, and maybe not just jarring, but also a sense of validation. And so I've had things like I remember I was in Texas, and I had a woman afterwards write me and say, I came with my mother and my daughter. So it was three generations of women in our family. And it was the first time we ever got, to start a conversation about the generational trauma that has come with money, particularly as women in this family. And yeah, it never fails to surprise me just how taboo talking about money is. Like I know that, but also how taboo talking about money and intergenerational trauma is. And so I feel just deep gratitude every time someone reminds me that this is conversations that need to continue happening, and that I've never had anyone come up and be like, "Oh, that doesn't resonate with me." Like I'm sure there's some people who maybe just they're not ready to hear it, or they've already done the work, but yeah, I think the most kind of the theme and the pattern that I've seen is just people saying, "Right, like I was ready to kind of jump into the practical, strategies, coming to a talk about financial activism or a workshop." And I always start kind of with the money stories and the importance of acknowledging our personal histories to economy and financial systems. And, yeah, it never fails to prick up people's ears, and so that's been interesting and not necessarily what I was expecting.
I find that too. I find, oh, I got to get back to the 101 constantly because it's like, this isn't an add-on for me. This is all I do and think about. So yeah, I have quite a capacity to sit in the discomfort of it. And I sit in it a lot. And often I do, oh yeah, money is emotional. Even just that,
Mm.
people need a minute to let that sink in if they haven't really, done or connected those dots before. And I'm like 5 miles down the road. I'm like, no, 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 I gotta back up and like tap into that beginner mind all the time. And that's where we find people. One thing I see in my clients and club members quite a bit is like a beautiful true drive to donate to causes and contribute to
Mhm.
causes, which is like noble and great. But the thing, especially as a therapist, I tap into is a lot of times it's guilt motivated.
Mm.
And and on a practical level, I find that people often really don't have the money to do that without putting themselves in some financial jeopardy or, potential harm in the future. Like really, I would just call it over donating.
Mhm.
So for those people who might be over donating and maybe driven out of guilt, how would you recommend they redirect that energy when they're like they see there's so much harm in the world, they feel guilty that they've got a steady job and they want to help other people and they're just donating to every GoFundMe that they see. How would you help them like redirect that energy?
Yeah. I don't want to kind of compound on the shame of like, oh, you thought you were doing something good and you're still doing it wrong because it's messy.
Right.
Like there isn't a singular right answer. But at the same time, I've seen that too, right? And I think I've been guilty of it in particular moments. And maybe even guilty isn't the right word, but I have tried to use money as a tool to as a quick fix, right? As a quick fix to deeply uncomfortable truths that on one hand, we are complicit in many of the systems of oppression and extraction that we are surrounded with. But at the same time, we didn't choose to, exist in this period of time under the particular circumstances, identities, and with the hearts that we have. And so, especially for folks who maybe particularly have a sensitive orientation to the world, I know that feeling of thinking that, when we can kind of check the boxes of saying, okay, well, I've donated to this. And so I've done my part. And, I think that what may be a helpful reframe is just the reminder that our individual, and it's so, you know, basic in some ways, but I think also revolutionary in other ways, much like all of these topics that we're talking about, where our individual well-being is inherently connected to collective well-being, right? Like to sacrifice ourselves in any capacity very often doesn't do much good to the larger. And of course, there's nuance that comes with that. But I often hear people talk about, I want to be a part of community wealth building, but don't factor themselves into community. And I think this comes back to the ideas of like, there's so many different forms of wealth that, like we were just talking about, are not kind of valued in the same way under capitalism. And there may be times when it's actually your energy that is more helpful or your visibility, the ability to just, for example, not only support a small business, but also to take the minute to write a positive review online so that they increase, visibility and are able to get kind of more customers. Like those are other forms of capital that are useful. And at the same time, like we all have our capacities and we all have our limits. And so I think for me, I realize that I am a better friend, daughter, colleague, human when I'm taking care of myself and making sure that my basics are checked off. And I'm asking for help and making sure that I, am in the position to give without depleting from my kind of core responsibilities of myself, my family, and our well-being. And so, yeah, this is one of those like those times when like a budget is very helpful to be able to pre-plan, how much of your income or wealth, if you have someone who has savings, you want to portion out over a particular course of time. Pre-making those decisions, I think, helps us be flexible, right? To say, okay, I already know that I have the capacity to give in these times without kind of putting ourselves in the position that we are now actually going to feel worse ultimately, because we have made a small contribution that may be helpful in some ways, but if it comes at the expense of our well-being, probably not the solution for sustainability.
Yeah, and it reminds me of a conversation I had with River Nice, who's
Mm-hmm.
are you familiar with River?
I
A
listened to
few.
that episode and it
Oh,
was
did you?
stunning.
So good.
Yeah.
And but bringing up this point that like also donating is so one directional, and it also keeps people at arm's length. Right.
Yeah.
Oh, I donated to that cause. I'm good. Like the ledger's clean. And also, like, I have no other involvement with that cause other than some money. And look, money can be incredibly helpful. I help out a lot of nonprofits. Like, it is what it comes down to. But I really appreciated that point that, like, are we checking a box? If this is a cause you also truly care about, there's so many ways, like you said, like sharing your capital and
Mhm.
other types of capital to help that cause. Thank you for listening to that episode. I love that one.
It's so good.
It's so good. It was a great conversation. And actually, River came to our book club conversation about your book and was so
Oh,
psyched and
fun.
said that yours is their favorite all-time financial book. So
A
I
deep
know.
honor. Deep, deep honor.
Shout out to River Nice, everybody. Okay. I'll link to that episode in the show notes.
Please.
So, okay, this is kind of a funny question because this also came from me coming to see you live and how you do your book tour. And you really bring this lightness and humor to your
Mhm.
talks. And I think, and it's really distinctive. And I think there is a change that I feel, and maybe it's because it's also the bubble that I'm in, that there's this sort of new generation of talking about money in ways that suit our generation, that
Mhm.
suits, more millennials and Gen Zs, where we're talking about, the social commitments and activism and things like that, but also like a lot of light and humor. And you bring a lot of humor into your book. So it's kind of a funny question, but like, even you have in your book that you suggest that you like read a legal disclaimer in Dolly Parton's voice. Is that right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Which, well, first, what's your best Dolly Parton impression, and why did you choose her?
I can't do justice to it. I can only do it in my
Oh,
mind.
she's in
Which is
here.
she's in here. So like
Gotcha.
when I'm reading and something is particularly boring, I like to think about, yeah, either Dolly Parton or someone that like I love reading it, because yeah, stuff is boring.
Stuff is
Like
boring,
stuff
you
is
guys.
boring and scary and intimidating, and so like we might as well, like, if we're narrating things in our minds, like bring in narrators we actually enjoy,
Yeah.
and that are real people. So
I love that. And how do you feel like humor and lightness, like how do you keep up with the humor and lightness, especially nowadays? I'm sure when you started writing this book, you weren't anticipating things being as they are right now and spring of 2025. And I mean, I kind of know the answer for me. Like I feel like humor and lightness is just a necessity to get through this stuff. But how do you sit with keeping some of that humor in your work?
that's so, I mean, so for me, humor maybe it's like never a conscious decision. Maybe it's a coping mechanism, but like if it is, I'll take it, because what, we might as well, right? But I think that if I appreciate the question because it helps me kind of zoom out of like, okay, why is this something that is so natural for me? And I think that really, like, personally, like, finance and activism can both be hella scary and intimidating and confusing and boring sometimes. Like, I've been there, and there is this sense, and I think maybe I speak for a good amount of folks when I say like, like you want to get it right so badly for so many reasons, like both finance and activism. And like, oh, I have so many feels about it, and maybe I overthink it, and it's hard. Like, to me, that's like hilarious. Like, that is so true and funny that like we know intellectually that like there isn't a singular right way to do any of these things, but like I still get caught up in the loops of like, oh, but I want to do it right. And I think that like a lot of things about the human experience and living under capitalism and all the contradictions and like being a sensitive ass woman are funny. And so just like being able to name the things that are maybe scary and confusing in financial activism breaks the tension, right? Which is going to make it more welcoming and accessible for people. And ultimately, I think we're trying to build a world that's a little more of a soft landing, or at least I know that I'm trying to build a world that's a more of a soft landing for people, and is maybe a little bit more like silly and whimsical and less like laugh to stop from crying about exploitation, though there will always be a level of that, right? And so, yeah, your question about kind of just like joy and lightness and it being, strategic in some ways is like, yeah, there's so many things that threaten our joy and our lightness in life. And I just don't think we should keep letting man-made, racialized, patriarchal, financial exploitation be one of those things, as much as possible.
And I'm thinking back to a trauma of money stuff is also like we're not able to learn, think flexibly,
Mhm.
understand nuance, step in someone else's shoes if we are triggered. And one of the interesting things about humor, and if we are laughing or smiling, that's already cueing to our body that we're okay. Because we
Right,
wouldn't be
right.
laughing and smiling if like we're being, chased by a bear. So immediately bringing that in, it's like, oh, I'm in a safe place. And then, oh, wow, now we can get into complexity, nuance,
Mm,
perspective taking and things like that. I mean, I think I accidentally bring that into my work a lot. I sometimes get feedback like, that was the funniest presentation on money I've ever had. I'm like, well, I have to do this or I can't like stick. It's
right,
got to be a good hang for me.
for sure. We have limited time here. Might as well be as enjoyable as it can be under the systems that we find ourselves in.
And then, ooh, guess
Yeah.
what? And then, oh, I remembered those things. Oh, I was able to get to a new place because all signs were pointing to actually this is safe. And that's where we
Mhm.
are healing the trauma of money, where, if money's been associated with harm and helplessness, then oh, no, anything having to do with money, puts me on edge or gets my spikes out. So, I think it's so important that we have these newer voices and newer ways of talking about money that taking away from the traditional white patriarchal way of talking about money, that is the way we do it. And it feels
Yeah,
safer, and it's healing so much harm that's been caused around the topic of money.
totally. Yeah, and like for sure, the stakes are high. It's dire out here. And at the same time, like, yeah, nothing great has come from taking myself too seriously.
No, it never works out. So stupid. Okay, well, a tag on question. What has writing this book and promoting this book taught you about
Mm.
yourself? So pretty. I'm
Oh,
a
geez,
therapist, Jasmine.
humbling.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I
What is
appreciate it so much. I mean, like, I'm still learning every day. Like, so the book came out. Yeah, math is not my strong suit. Came out in
Thank you.
September. We're in May.
Yeah, no, yeah, I felt fall. Yeah, definitely in the fall
Yeah,
of 24. Yeah.
and so it's been out like a minute, but it's still kind of a newborn. And I'm not saying anything new, but to be a creative in any capacity in an economy that doesn't really value or protect creative labor is
It's hard.
yeah, it's humbling. It's
It's just
humbling.
hard. Yeah.
And it can also be super rewarding, right? Like, I mean, so the kind of to pull back the curtains on the process as someone who is a first time author and doesn't, represent what most authors look and feel like. So the stats in nonfiction publishing are pale, male, stale, like many other things.
Wait,
And
say that
so
again. Hail, mail, and
pale,
stale.
male. Yeah, And so I, did feel like a little bit of an outsider to the book publishing, world, but I was able to draw inspiration from other, particularly women of color who have written books, from other creatives who have stepped into their authentic voices. And I wrote the book as kind of a like passion project at night. Like I held a full-time job, in the world of impact investing for the 4 or so years that I was doing this book. And yeah, it kind of just became my nightly quiet time between the hours of like wouldn't recommend this, but like 9 p.m. and 1 a.m., like those were my bookish hours, and not totally sustainable for a long time, but worked, and it worked for me. And like I had to kind of just accept like this is my practice, right? And the other thing that I think was humbling and just kind of like respecting the like time that like the creative energy and like life allows me to write is also just like seeing how many people were excited to support this vision. Like I actually still sometimes feel weird that it's my name on the book when it does feel like such a collective project. Like I'm able to feel really proud of this thing because to me, I look at it and immediately reminded of all the conversations and people who were like willing to trust me to like steward their research, right? Like all of the collaboration that went into this singular, like pretty small thing gave me a lot of hope. And like it's actually really hard for me to not be hopeful in the sense like people always ask like, oh, how do you maintain hope? And I'm like, to not maintain hope would be a disservice, I think, to all of the people who collaborated on sharing their stories of financial activism, who did the actual work of moving money and reclaiming wealth and well-being against all odds. It filled my cup. Like it was kind of addicting, right? And of course, for anyone who's written, a book, there's times where it just doesn't work. Like you're just like, I actually can't even look at a screen right now. And like, yeah, you need to respect that time too. But I think, the process of writing the book, of kind of giving myself permission to lean into the identity of an author and to just like say yes to the journey was also humbling because I think that I originally was like, oh, I've always been a writer, I've always been a reader. Like, I know, I'll just put this content out in a book and then like it'll just be out in the world, right? And like other people will just take it and it'll be good. Like I'll have done my part. And like I learned that like to write a book in this day and age is also to like have a small business. Like it
Yeah.
is totally on you unless you are, and probably still, at one of the big kind of four publishing houses. Publishing industry is very much like a pay to play industry. And so for those of us who don't have excess income to invest into PR and marketing and like all the elements that go into visibility and algorithms, like it is a very kind of grassroots project where it's very word of mouth. It's very, about just trying to make sure this labor of love you invested all this time in with others actually now gets into the hands of people who can benefit from it is an entire second journey. And so that's the part of the journey that you're seeing me on now. And I'm deeply grateful for. And I think it gives me a new perspective on what it is, for the first time. I left my job a few months ago, which was terrifying to not have the
That's
stability
big.
of the and it was a job that I was in for almost 7 years. And yeah, I'm getting to kind of see the economy from this other side as someone who is independent and doesn't have, the same level of psychological stability that maybe I had when I had the benefits and the 401k and like all the things that I'm like, oof, that was so nice. And the agency to actually in this time only say yes to conversations related to the book that feel meaningful, only say yes to gatherings that feel like authentic related to the book, I feel like is what is serving this kind of creative project and doing justice to it is, yeah, being able to kind of craft and choose my own adventure, which is something that is kind of a theme throughout the book of like there isn't like a singular path, but we need to trust ourselves and our communities
Right. And here
to
you are.
experiment and practice. So
Right. And I think
yeah.
about like, being in your regular job while writing this, that was such an important, aspect of safety and continuity and reliability so
Hmm.
that you could be creative. Because when we're in an activated state, we kind of get into survival mode. It's harder to be
Yeah,
creative. So I think there's
totally.
no surprise that the book was born out of that time, and now you're in a new chapter to really like give it all you got to get it out there. Because it is surprising how much is on the author to self promote a
Yeah.
book.
Yeah.
So I
Even
hand it
when
to
you
you.
like I do want to shout out like I feel very, very fortunate that I got to work with a values aligned publisher, which
Cool.
is rare, I think, sometimes in these days, where I actually recently joined the board of it's called Barrett Kohler Publishers. It's based here in Oakland, California. But it is a publisher that has committed to, against the odds, right? Stay independent and really value the voices of authors and agency on autonomy, which is just not how publishing has developed. Publishing has become very much a product of capitalism when it is all about profits and how do we, streamline and make the tried and true methods. And that means that it's not accessible to a lot of young people, people of color,
That
women.
first time author, right? It's a
Yeah.
huge hurdle. It's a huge barrier to entry. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
so cool that you've gotten, hey, again, that's using another source of wealth, another source of capital. Hey, to be part of a board, right? And I'm
Yeah.
part of several boards. It's really a meaningful thing for me in terms of, volunteering or being part of a leadership and offering your time. That's very cool.
Yeah.
So that leads me to the next question is, do you have any sense of what the next project is? Are you just like so in book baby right now that you can't? But like, What do you think could be next? Is it another book? Is it another kind of project? Can you talk about it?
Yeah, so people are always like, "Oh, you must be so relieved to have done this book." And I'm just like, "Yeah, I could kind of do it again." Like I I love the process. Like I said, I think that I feel most myself when I'm not only writing, but when I'm able to be a steward for ideas and draw visibility to amazing work. Like I actually very rarely feel like I say anything new, and I kind of like that. I like that I'm able to just be a, you know, connector and to point people to things that already exist and just show some love and shine some light. And so I don't know if it's necessarily like I don't have a kind of solid book idea, but I think the idea of like actually being a writer who writes is something I'm intrigued by. And I think it's giving myself permission to actually step into that a little bit more fully. And so my kind of intention for this year is to just be really, as hard as it is, be really open to the projects that arise, that call to me, that feel deeply aligned with this mission that I set out for myself of helping everyday people reclaim wealth and collective well-being. Like even just being able to have that like singular statement that can encompass a lot, but is also like kind of niche, helps me filter out like what to say yes and no to. And so I think that more writing, I think more gatherings, more intentional gatherings where we get to do this work of connection and humaning and navigating, our financial systems together, that's really been filling my cup and reminding me of like there's this meme that's going around that's like I almost forgot that this was the whole point, and it's like cute pictures of people just like laying in the sun with their friends or like just like having those like moments of softness and lightness, which is what so many of us grind for, right? Like we grind for these moments, you know of ease. And so as scary as it am, I'm also just letting myself lean into the moments of ease and presence in these times, which is not my natural orientation. Someone who very much has been the, overachieving, like need to have the full plan ahead of me. So yeah, stay tuned on my experiment in being present and figuring it out as I go.
Well, I'm here for it. And in the club, we will read the shit out of anything you make. So we're here for it. Come back to Denver. We'll host a hang like
Oh
any
yeah.
old time. I know there really is a hunger for the in real life meetups that got so disrupted with the pandemic and other things, and our third place is being taken away and being replaced by
Hmm.
social media and it being commodified, our daily lives being
Hmm.
so commercialized and commodified. And yeah, just the hang, go to a park and read, guys. Like it's so good. Just be with your friends. You don't have to go out to a fancy meal. That's
Yeah.
big thing I push for. Well, this has been so wonderful. I do feel like I could talk to you forever, and there's so much, but everyone, I've got it right here. Everyone pick up the Financial Activist
Beautiful.
Playbook. It is a gorgeous book. I will link to it on bookshop.org. We also have a whole storefront of all the money healing books that I recommend, but this is a top one. Also, I got to say, there were some members in the group in my club who said they never thought they would ever read a financial book, that they could read this one, and that made them feel like there was something they could do.
Yeah. I thank you for saying that. I never thought I would write a financial book. And it still is kind of one of those things that I'm like, yeah, hilarious. Again, coming back to just like life shows us what we need to do. And
Yeah.
I think this is, it's really validating for me to hear that I'm helping people an entryway into just their orientation around what might be possible with finance, because the system is real and it is something that has caused so much harm, and it's something that is only going to change when we decide that it's ours to change.
Mic drop. I think we'll leave it there. Thank you so much, Jasmine, for being on the podcast. And I know we will stay in touch. I'll send you more tissues when I get them done.
Please, need them.
Thank you for listening to the Money Healing Club podcast, and I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Jasmine Rashid. You can find resources, links to her book, everything from this episode in the show notes below or at moneyhealingclub.com/podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, you'd probably love my free email course on curbing impulse spending with compassion and mindfulness. You can check that out at moneyhealingclub.com/challenge. Do you have a question or topic about financial therapy or financial activism or just living in this life with capitalism? I'd love to get your voicemail to be featured on a future episode of the podcast. You can go over to moneyhealingclub.com/podcast. There's a big orange button right there where you can record from any device you're on. I really appreciate you helping to build the show. See you next time.